Well, good evening. Thank you guys so much for joining us here tonight on Recalibrate. Whether you are watching live right now on Zoom with us or you're watching this later on YouTube, we're excited to have you here. My name is Josh Overton. I get the opportunity and the privilege to work with the Zoweh team, with allies, specifically loving on and connecting with pastors and churches. And so excited to have you here tonight, to have the guys live with us. And joining me is the one and only Michael Thompson, the founder of Zoweh, the author of The Heart of a Warrior. And Michael, we're really glad to have you here, man.
Awesome to be with you guys. Really, really good for my heart.
Yes, sir. I think tonight's conversation may end up being one of our highest viewed YouTube videos when the word gets out of what we talked about tonight. Between guys who missed it, wanting to go watch it, and then guys like me who want to go back and rewatch it. I rewatched the game film, right? I think it's going to be a good one because I know I've been to 8 or 9 weekends now, and
Wow.
I've been married for a decade. And Michael, still one of my number one questions that I hear, and even the question I have myself is, how do I bring this home? How do I have this conversation with my wife, right? How do I go after her heart? How do I tell my wife that she needs to get her heart healed and whole, right? And so, that topic, that conversation is really what we're moving into tonight. And I'll throw it to you. Any opening statements, if you will. And then I got a few questions I'll just throw your way, kind of interview style, and we'll ping pong.
Yeah, we could sum it up in 2 words, Josh, right? And some of these guys are veterans and they've returned home from Heart of a Warrior. So the 2 words are very carefully.
Yes.
How do you do this? Very carefully. But
yes.
I think you guys have heard some of my stories, and Robin actually tell some of our story, about me being a little overexcited, overzealous, over hopeful, and kind of rolling over her in the process, running over her with, you gotta go get your heart back, honey. And that's become a bit of a legendary story in our story. And yet God did a great favor and for me, and just kind of patched that up a little bit as she stepped in. But so we can expand on that if you want some more, Josh. But that's how my first reentry started. So I get the excitement, I get the hope, that men have coming off that weekend. And where do I start? How do I share this with her? And each man has probably some different things, I think we can talk about some strategy, but different men come away from that time, under sweet conviction. And I use that adjective on purpose, or is that an adverb? Sweet conviction. They realize what maybe how they've been aiding the enemy in hurting or wounding her, or not. If it's not aggressive, or it's not, that anger that a lot of men suffer from, it's just passivity, so it's even recognizing different men have different things to take home and share with. And maybe that's a good place to start. How do we go home and share with her? And when are there less landmines than others, and how do we help men do that very carefully, so.
Yeah. And I think you deal with both, right? You have this conviction of, man, I want to rush home and fix all these things that I've missed, or that maybe all the wounding that I've caused, right? So you have this awakening to that. But then you also have what you mentioned of, like, then you want to go after her heart, and you see the good that you've found, and now you want her to experience that. And like you said, I think we kind of say it tongue in cheek now with, honey, you need to get your heart back. But as a man who's read the book, as a man who's engaging with his group, and as a man who goes to a weekend, how do you enter safely and carefully back into that?
Yeah, well, hopefully, I say most, um, I think most brides want to know how the weekend was, so we addressed this a little bit in our final words or in, kind of re-entry. Um, what does it look like to thank her for the weekend? What's it look like to prepare an answer, right? To prepare, how was it? Um, and and instead of, kind of what I would tell my younger self, let me say it that way, Josh, what I would tell myself 15 years ago, I'd say, take it easy, go slow, and the excitement, maybe give, start with one that maybe have three things that that I want to share. I think one of the first things I did, Josh, was because I heard a similar message to what we still kind of offer and share. I really felt the need to apologize for some things. And I didn't go to the deeper end of the pool with, whether pornography um, or yeah, any uh, maybe anger issues. Just those were two, but
Mhm.
I think I started more with just missing her, missing her heart, and want to do better, want to try to do better. But so I think there's men that, they feel that sweet conviction at the event, and an apology maybe is a place there, but questions are always good. Can, when she asks how was it, and we share great or really important or wow, I don't know what to say. But I think some of the questions that we might ask them would, they've probably been waiting to answer, either nervously or fearfully, not being invited into that space. But it's a tough question in a marriage to say, I learned a lot. What's it been like to be with me these last years? How have we learned, and tell them we learned some things at this conference, like this idea of handling other people's hearts. How's that been for you with me? And then you gotta, you know, be careful, because it may be painful to hear her side of that story. And there's your first big game, really, when it comes to letting her express her heart, and not defending yours, not defending yourself. um, I'd even back up, Josh, and say, my girls were, back then, they were kind of tweens and teenagers. um, it might even be worth, if I was creating a video encouragement, I'd say it might even be worth waiting a day or two. Just saying, man, there's so much I can't wait to tell you. I'm really excited. But how are you? How's your weekend been? I've been the one away. How's the home front? Just little things like that could set the table, probably create um, a better sharing, listening to her. In my household, I think that was kind of the history, was I did most of the talking, and to learn how to do more of the listening, and asking questions was a skill that I needed help with, and got pretty purposeful, intentional, kind of after this message, and hearing about loving a woman, and the heart of a woman, the core desires of a woman's heart. Those were a bit of Wild at Heart, and it's in there in King Me, too, and it's in there in Heart of a Warrior for sure. So I think those were, asking, sharing maybe some of the things I learned with her, um, in that space of my heart wounds, different things like that. So many women, I think what we're hearing, Josh, from the Rendezvous Project and some other things, women who we've kind of earned the right to hear from them. Maybe their husbands have been a couple times. Maybe another way to ask the same question is, how do we not leave them behind? Because that's what we are hearing from, some of the couples who were sharing at the Rendezvous projects. And it's why we created the Rendezvous project. In one regard, we really did start that a decade plus ago so that men could bring their wife into a message, maybe before there was a deepening weekend for them to get to. So it was another way to provide an environment. There's the deepening weekend, and some women that, women's conference, women's retreat. No, thank you. Been there. No,
Right.
Don't want to do that. So you've got hurdles, you've got landmines, you've got some pretty steep inclines depending on her story and her heart and where she is.
Yes.
But, and yet, I think some men did a pretty good job of, not rushing the field, of being kind in their reentry. But a year or two later, they're involved in calls. They got a group of guys in small groups. She's kind of watching him get better, but the enemy's just whispering little lies of resentment. And what about me? Yeah. So, I thought about that even in preparation for this, Josh. Maybe it's the time to say it. Crap, if there's a marriage book that does not have one chapter devoted to warfare, if not several, throw it away.
Yeah, I think, you talk about that so much. We talk about it so much in our conversations, in the book, certainly the things that oppose us, and realizing that transcends certainly beyond just our own personal stories, our own personal hearts, but our relationships, our marriage is like 100%. I think as I was writing some response to this too, that was what you just shared. The very end of that was my story. My wife was at home with young kids. I was going away. I was getting healed of things that I hadn't even talked to her about yet. So not only do I have to have the conversation about what I'm experiencing, I now have to invite her into some of the pain that we really hadn't even had a conversation about. And that can't be a Sunday night. I walk in the door, drop the bags. Here, honey, come drink from the fire hydrant. Right? Even though I wanted to, right? Even though that's because I was filled up. I was overflowing. Yeah. I wanted to share that.
Yeah.
Waiting was some of the best advice I got from guys like you and SJ. Waiting, and then inviting to see. And as I've learned more about my own heart, one of the ways that I love and have and share is by sharing experiences. So if I love to do it, I want people that I love to do it with me. And so inviting her to that, and there were some no's. There were some, I'm fine, thank you. I got some of that early on too. But man, what a beautiful journey to now, a decade later. I've been walking in this with you guys personally for a decade.
Yeah.
And just now, in some ways, my wife, who is wonderful and loves Jesus and has loved Jesus as much as anyone I've ever known, even we're just now beginning to step into some of that together. And it has taken time. And I've had to make a few swings and misses, but then we've gotten some hits too, so yeah. I got a question for you. There's a quote at the very beginning of chapter 13. There's this wonderful book, guys, called The Heart of Warrior. We actually have the author on with us right now. It's pretty cool. At the very top, though, there's a quote that starts chapter 13 entitled Loving a Woman. That quote is from Oscar Wilde. It says, "Women are made to be loved, not understood." What does that mean? What's that mean, Michael? Why'd you choose that quote for this to be the header, right? The headline for this chapter?
You guys have all seen The Nail, the video we've done of The Nail, and right. It's so funny, and yet it's not sad. It's disruptive, that she's talking about all her sweaters are getting snagged, and all the this pain right here.
She has a nail in her head, guys. For those of you that might not know,
right.
She has
that video,
literal nail.
Yeah, just YouTube it. It'll take you there. But but to listen, how she's feeling, and to enter into, that space, without your tool belt on is, I think Mr. Wild is kind of, pointing in that direction.
Yeah.
And, I know when we get to this conversation a little bit later, our wives are different, their history, they have the feminine heart, though we have a generalization of that. The enemies come after them in some pretty significant ways. And I think some of their fears, Brooke, for example, versus Robin,
Yeah.
not Brooke and Robin, and and different ways that, it's hard to come up with just a list of things to step back in the home front. And I want to go back to, throwing away the other marriage books. That's a pretty harsh idea, but I feel that, there are some good tips and techniques, and how-tos are really important, and love languages are important, and there is some things that I think are important. Don't throw all those books away, but when you begin to bring the warfare into it, it gets far less predictable and far less equational, and you are entering into, I think, the lair of the enemy as it comes to your wife. So you could do all these things well that we're talking about, but it doesn't mean you won't bump up against some trip line or trip wire, and
Sure.
that the enemy has, been whispering to her. So I think praying up, even as you go home, I'd probably add that to our list, Josh, to just start to take those warfare prayers into re-entry. And, if she's feeling like, well, I'm glad you had a good time, while you were out there, Junior did this, Sweetie did that. And, and the car's not running. So I'm glad you had a great time. That you just got handed your starting line, your starting point, like, and you're all excited about telling her, if you can't find an audible there, or if you can't find another gear or a way to get it in park, and right there, the enemy's like, right, you always do this, and then wham, all of a sudden, things are just collapsing, around you. But I think this very carefully thing, Josh, is still holds, some merit in that. And it's a fragile thing, to bring our wives into some intimate time that we've had with God and include them. And, I think there is another idea that if at first you don't succeed, try again, but I have talked to men, I have talked to them, and there are those men that, like, Michael, you don't know my wife, you don't understand. So sometimes what was kind of a sleeping bear, you come home from the weekend and it pokes the bear. I'm not making her the bear, I'm just saying something gets awakened, because the enemy knows in the strategy that they've perfected, they can get 2 for 1. And if they don't have to diminish you directly, if they can have her do it, it's almost more effective, and so it's there's a warfare element to that. And I think I've learned over the years how to not navigate the landmine, but really disarm the mines.
Yes.
And as I hear and listen for Robin's heart, and she does, my wife particularly, she does want to know. So I'm not hindered by, particularly me, my story, I'm not hindered by her interest. I can be hindered by my tiredness. I can be hindered by my overwhelmedness. I can be hindered by, just because those weekends can be so tiring. I remember years ago, a guy said, you can't call these retreats anymore. That's not, that's not a good name. I'm exhausted, you know. And so, um, so yeah, I think maybe things like, honey, as she asks, you know, I'm excited to tell you, could we take a little time every day for the next week? I'd love to just, I want to think through my notes. I want to invite you into the experience I had. And, you know, and maybe that's a way to buy time and to kind of give yourself a chance to engage in, and even how you're feeling and what you're thinking. Cause that, um, you know, I think that can be hard for some men, just to, you're wanting to, you know, I was wanting to do something with Robin, frankly, Josh, that in that first year, that first time, that we hadn't, I mean, we were in ministry together, but we didn't talk about our hearts, our lives, and our the mission of our marriage and the ministry together, like I was looking at after that weekend, you know. And so,
Well, and how many Christian marriages live under the assumption that I'm going to assume your heart is doing well unless you tell me it's not. And
right.
so, and even, and maybe even then, you're right. We've got kids, we've got
Mhm.
things to do. We're just gonna, you know, so that's tough. Sorry, we're gonna keep moving through it.
Yeah.
I know we've said that around the office in a different context, but I think it applies certainly to
Yeah.
Christian. I mean, you can be a Christian, you can love Jesus, you can love each other, but not step into that. I think that's part of right orientation, awakening to that, deepening,
Yeah.
fulfilling all of that.
Yeah.
Certainly, certainly.
Yeah. I think I'd say let me say something about this, the healing process, Josh, and then maybe you can comment. But um, you know, I believe that as I was getting healing from Jesus on father wounds and mother wounds and other wounds, I learned, I actually started to experience that I could trust that I could actually trust that in equipping me to love Robin and my girls differently, hopefully better. But the healing, that was still the mission I had when I came home. You know, not, and we're talking about sharing with our wives and reentry, but that's not the mission. You know, the mission is to stay a course. The mission is to learn a practice. The mission is to continue in what that weekend or subsequent weekends are where they're taking us, and that's into our own healing and our own healing and training. And so, you know, what the more of that I pursued as I got home, I think the more that helped me in being patient, in you know, slowing down, in being tender with my heart, and learning how to do that it just helped me be tender with other people's hearts, my wife and my girls. So I mean, I would just, I would put that out there as a part of, the mission is still your heart, wholehearted. And then how do we include, or how do we invite her into that, you know, weeks later, months later? Because the thing that can come against marriages and reentry, right, is they're just kind of watching, you know, is this going to stick?
Yeah. Yeah.
How long is this going to last? You know, so I think the slow and steady and the patient and the stay the course is a good plan. And, you know, opportunity to ask her questions, to invite her into notes that I wrote. You know, what can I ask you a question? What do you think? What do you think about this? This came up at the weekend.
Yeah.
You know, maybe even get that date scheduled, you know, for can your mom come over and watch the kids for a few hours, and we do it, you know, do it on Wednesday night, get out, and I bring my notes, and I just would really love to unpack that. So, but how about you? I mean, you're you've done this enough. You've come home 9 times, you
Sure.
know. When do you think Brooke started to trust? And I know a lot of guys I see their faces, they're veterans. They've come home more than once, twice, 3 times, 4 times. When did Brooke start to trust you and trust the weekend and trust us?
Yeah. I'm really glad that you went where you just went. I was hoping you would, because this entire time, the answer that I feel like, other than slow and steady, carefully, is that's a great answer. Also, walking with God is the answer, right? And that is, I have come to attribute that to the Mr. Miyagi car waxing illustration. Like, really, like, I want to learn karate. I'm here to learn kung fu, Mr. Miyagi. I'm not here to detail your cars until he says, "Now show me waxing." And it's like, show me wiping the windows, and it's just, oh my God, there it is. And because I felt that I heard what you and the guys were saying that weekend, and not even just the weekend, but going through the book too. Like, there's parts of the book where I would stop and be, okay, I got to go. I want to go have this conversation now. I need to go take care of this now. But no, I'm going to finish the book. Right? I'm going to finish the book. I'm going to finish the group. And so I say all that to say, um, man, I just did my best to continue to become the best me that I could. Like, I felt that if I would continue on my journey, if my heart became whole, then I'm going to love her the way that she deserves and desires to be loved. If my heart becomes whole, then I'm going to be able to father my children the way that they should be fathered.
Right.
And then that would lead to the conversations. That would lead to the invitations, because there was a moment when someone in my life had this big salvation moment, and it was a 180, and it was, all right, we're going to do this, 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 and this out of nowhere. And then the next weekend we were all like singing hymns together, like in the home. And it was, which is fine, but was like, who just came out of the cornfield? You know what I mean? Like, this is out of left field. And then 2 weeks later, it was back to what it had always been. Right.
Yeah. The enemy comes to, steal.
And so I didn't want to do that. And I knew that I needed to go on a journey, and something, again, that we've said, walk with God carefully, treadfully off. Yeah. But then also I felt that the best thing I could do for her heart and my kids was get my own heart back. Yeah. And trust in that if there is a process, to trust in that process, and that it would work out. So that's, and I think through that, Brooke certainly began to trust in that. So,
yeah.
I'd love for you to make a few closing thoughts, if you like, Michael, and then we can open it up, guys, for a bit.
Yeah, I think back, and as you were talking, you said something about, loving her, loving them. I mean, Robin was watching me. There's no doubt about it. I wouldn't say judging, but she was watching.
Yeah.
To your point, I mean, is this going to work? Is this going to stick? What is, that we do have a language, a kind of a kingdom language, some might say a Zoweh language. We have a language of some certain words that's not familiar to them. I'd be careful, they didn't read Heart of a Warrior or Wild at Heart at the time. It's always a little uncomfortable to be in a conversation you're not sure what they're talking about, or what the terminology means. So I think that's another potential landmine. But Robin was watching, and frankly, in my story, the thing that impressed her the most, I've heard her say, I know I needed to change some of the ways that I was handling her heart, but the thing she was watching the most is how I was handling the girls' hearts, how I was interacting with our children. So I think that's another, that can be another great place to kind of win them over, if I could use that term, win them to trust. win them to, I mean, when you are able to be more loving and kind and patient with the kids, that's a way to love mama.
Yeah.
In a way that's very important to her. And I still am learning this, Josh. I mean, I'm still learning how to ask questions. I wish I had more training in my 30s for sure. And then, I woke up at 38. I'm 57 now, and I'm learning how to ask her questions. I'm learning how to ask my friends questions. I'm learning how to ask my kids questions, through either text or phone calls. And it's not that I don't want to share what I'm learning, but even if a rookie, a newbie, a freshman, comes out of the weekend, if there's one thing I would probably say more in these next few encounters, I'd even give them some questions, like I just said, well, man, I'm so full, hon, from the weekend. How was your weekend? How are you? And if they're on the prayer list, if they're on the prayer request, if they're on the I team, I think that's a great way to set the table. She actually hears what you're going through. So I would tell more men to make sure your wife's on the I team for you. Of the 3 or 4 people you submit, let her pray the prayers, let her see the schedule that way. She'll know a lot more about your weekend that way.
Mm-hmm.
Make a note of that, Josh. Let's make sure we
Yeah.
we tell these guys that on the back end, hey, if you want to do we'll just sell it that way. It's a private email. If you want to do yourselves a favor,
Yes.
on reentry, have her sign up. But yeah, those are just a couple.
That's good.
Couple thoughts before we open it up, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I really appreciate the theology, if you will. I know we can use that word hopefully, but also the practicality of it. I think there were some helpful tips and tricks. Just some reminders and some guides, which are good. So yeah.
John said this real quick. Back to the reentry is important, but the bigger where you're really wanting to go as cunningly, covertly, even maybe not manipulative. But I took John Eldridge at Wild at Heart to heart when he said her wound is your mission. And I still feel like I'm walking with that with Robin. I'm learning what that feels and looks like now. Because we're not out of the battle, we're not out of the war. I hope I'm wounding her less. I believe I'm wounding her less. But she's still getting hit by other people, by family. I mean, kid wounds. There's just things she can get missed and hurt. And I've learned to say, well, honey, you shouldn't feel that way, or honey, that's not true. I'm really learning how to even ask more and more questions like, well, what does that feel like? And why does it hurt so much? Is it new? Is it old? I'm getting a little bit better at that over the years, and right, not trying to fix her,
right,
and yet try to enter into. And if I do that well, I feel like I find there is a time, because I've done a little research with her in the Q&A of her heart, that I actually then become a better king, a better warrior, a better protector. When instead of, well, honey, that's not true. Honey, why does that feel so true? And I don't see you that way at all, but I can understand why that hurts. And then, can I pray with you? Can we, sometimes Robin's up for that, sometimes not. And is she going to be a scorecard on me, or is she going to be, a partner in this battle, in this life? So there's things I had to, that I became aware of, that I held wrongly, inaccurately, through performance life and relational performance life, that, some of those gifts that she was struggling with were actually helping me see how I've contributed to that, or how I can enter into that better. So, but her wound and wounded heart is I think part of what I would close in saying, that's a big part of our mission. And that takes time, not just, honey, you got to go get your heart back.
Yes.
I think it's a bigger battle